Hey y'all, I am Daniel Aaron, world expert on vibrant living, and I got a story for you. And it's a story, it's also potentially important for you and potentially important for us these days, because it's a story about yoga, and it's a story about the difference between excluding, pushing away versus including. So it's a story about peace and how we can create it and how we are at an important time in our world history, or is it a her story, for creating a whole new paradigm experience of love and union. And this is an evolving story, and it may actually not even be done yet. I'm going to tell you just the first chapter, just a tiny bit of it. And I've been thinking of it in this way, of how I want to share it with you in the last few months by seeing what's happening in the world and with the US president's, I'm saying it like it's a secret, with what Trump did with the immigration ban. And you know, that targeting, is it targeting places or people or religions or ideologies or skin colors? We don't know. And as we do know, though, there's been a lot of backlash about it on all sides. And that's what this story is really is about, is sides. Why do we have sides, and do we want to keep having sides? Let me show you my good side. I lived in Bali for a good part of my life. It was an awesome part of my life, and a good part in time too. It was 13 years I was there. And when I went, I didn't know anything. Nobody I knew talked about immigration, and I was one of the first yoga teachers there, and there was no such thing as a yoga teacher permit or immigrant. And I started offering trainings, and that was all fine, but then somewhere in there started to be some immigrations checking on things, and it was like, well, wait a minute, yeah, that makes sense. I'm in a foreign country. I want to, invest in this country too and take care of things. And I was the first legal yoga teacher in Bali. Well, as legal as anything can be in Indonesia. And nonetheless, and this is what blew me away, is shortly after that, I got targeted by immigration on a training I was leading. And even with the right permit, and I thought I was like solid, they're not going to be able to say anything to me because I got this permit. It was a drama, and it was scary, and I didn't know how to play, because it is kind of a game. And I was pissed off, man, because they were not being honest with me. They were saying, you didn't do this, and I'm like, but I did that, and you didn't do this, and and I learned, and I got some great help, that really what was going on is they wanted respect and power and maybe payment. And I say that with some hesitation, because there's still fear in me about what immigration can do and how they might even receive this if they do see it. And at the same time, I really understand why they might want payment, because they're in a system that is built upon corruption and bribes. And these guys who work in immigration are good guys. They're real people with real hearts, and they're working in a field which is very difficult. And I'll tell you in a little bit about one guy that really rocked my world and taught me something really valuable that I know you're going to love. But they've paid for their positions. They paid to get into those hard to do positions. And that's part of the way the system is they get paid back. Anyway, I didn't know how the system worked, and I was righteous, and I was like, and that didn't go so well for me. All right, I'm going to skip ahead. And skipping ahead to just last year, I had a interesting little development, which was I was on a trip to North America, and I had a great guy working with me named Raphael, who was the general manager of Radiantly Alive at the time. Now he's the new owner of it. Go Raphael! And while I was away on my trip, I was in La Jolla, in fact, California, staying with my brother and doing a leadership training across town, and I was full on in that all day, and then I would come home to my brother's house at night and I would jump on Skype meetings with Rafael and other people in Bali, and we're getting ready for teacher training, and there was a lot of cool stuff going on, and we were doing our first contest of how to we gave somebody a free place on the training for how yoga is going to change the world, and it was a really inspiring, energetic, cool time. And in one of those conversations, it was like, 1:30 in the morning or something for me, and Rafael was in midday in Bali, and we're in the country. He's like, oh yeah, and one other thing, your working permit, Kitas, is going to expire while you're away. And I received that news with great peace and calm and no. I was like, what did you say? What's that? And he's like, yeah, we just discovered it's going to expire while you're away. And so I'm like trying to breathe and be calm, like, because that seems like that could be a real big problem. And but he's like, we've got a couple options and ideas, and great leadership tip. He came to me with a problem, but also with solutions. And so we worked through it a little while, and I did my best to contain my irritation. Not very helpful in life and business and relationships. And was really happy with the process. And he said, so this is what we're going to do, and here's the solution. I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. And what the solution meant was that we would do for me what we did at the time for our guest faculty, which was a 1-month permit, a legal one. It was a legal working document, again, as legal as anything can be in Bali. And what it meant was when I arrived back in Bali, I wouldn't actually be able to go back into the studio that I built and teach until that 1-month period came, which was, the period of our training. So, more detail perhaps than you're looking for. 2 days before the trainings to begin and that legal working period comes, I get this feeling in me, and I call up Rafael, send him a message actually, and say, hey, just checking, want to make sure that we're really covered for this, and we got the all the permits and everything. Will you double check on that? And he writes me back right away like, I'm 100% sure. I've made phone calls, I've gotten emails, but yeah, and I'll check again. And then I think it's the next day I go into the studio, and it's like I can go back into the studio. I was feeling so excited and say hi to everybody, and I'm in there and I'm talking and I'm all excited, and then I see Rafael and he looks at me like this. I was like, I'm like, hey, what, are you okay? He's like, no. I'm like, is there some kind of problem? Yes. And so meanwhile I'm like thinking really fast, thinking like, oh no, that must be the thing with immigration. And I'm like, does it have to do with them? Yes. I'm like, so we better leave actually to talk about this. I can't be here. He's like, that's right. So we go for a walk, and poor guy, man, he's just like, oh, he feels so bad because this was like his responsibility. And he's like, and I'm calling him this, and I can't believe it. And so at this point, I'm like, all I'm caring about is this guy in front of me. Like poor guy, I'm like, okay, what's cool? We'll figure it out. And it was amazing because like I had a training starting the next day with, I don't know, 50, 60 people, all of whom are counting on me, and they've paid a lot to be there. And I had this feeling of like, it's okay. And if I can't be there, it's okay. It was not rational at all. And we had a great team of people working with me. But I certainly didn't feel like they could do it without me. I mean, they could, but it wouldn't be right. For me, it wouldn't be right. It's not, anyway. But somehow I felt like, this is okay. I don't know. Anyway, and so Rafael and I are talking, and we're kind of figuring out, and then he gets a phone call, and it's our immigration agent. He's like, yeah, I got the permit, and I have the paper, and I can get it to you. I was like, yes, okay. All right. So the training begins, and the first 4 days is a program we created called the Radiant Life Activation, and it's a 4-day high energy intensive, and it includes people on the yoga teacher training and people just there for that. And we had taken it to a whole new production level, and we had a great crowd and a so many people supporting it to make an amazing event. And it was going like so unbelievably well. Through the first full day of it, we were just on fire, and there's so much energy in the room. And we took our first real break, I think, at maybe 6:30, 7 p.m., just after dark. And I come off stage, and when I get off stage, Raphael's waiting for me. And he was in the group too, so I'm like, huh. And I look at him, and right away it's clear. I'm like, really? Immigration's here? A Sunday night in Bali. Immigration was there. I was like, well, something's going on. This is weird. And I said, but we have the paperwork. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, we're fine then. He's like, yeah, but they want to talk to you, and they want your passport. I'm like, okay. So I go out and talk to the immigration guy, and I know him. I've seen him from other times, and he's there out of uniform on a Sunday night by himself. And but I'm thinking, it's fine, it's cool, I'll just cooperate with him. And I'm even kind of joking with him, and I'm feeling really great, and he's not joking back, but okay. And he fills out this paper, and he takes my passport, and he says, well, everything's fine, but we're still gonna have to do an interrogation, and you'll have to come in on Thursday. And I'm thinking two things. I'm thinking, one, our agent's gonna take care of this, I'm not gonna have to go in there. Two, Thursday, that would be, if there is a problem, that would be a good time for it, because this 4-day thing, I lead pretty much the whole thing, and 1, 2, 3, 4 days, that will finish on Wednesday. So, okay, interesting. Anyway, he leaves, we go back on. 4-day event was amazing and awesome. We were all so like jazzed. The trainees have the 5th day, the morning off. We're having a meeting with our whole staff, and everybody's just pumped up. There's like 10 of us in this meeting, and right in the meeting, Amanda passes me her phone, and there's a text, and it says, 4 immigration officers are here, and they're looking for Daniel. And I'm like, see that, and I don't want to alarm anybody else at the table, so I'm like, okay, we'll talk about that after the meeting. And meanwhile, I'm like, my heart starts racing. And it's just like this, like, you see a snake in the wild, and part of us is just going to react to it. It's like that with immigration, and for some of us with authority. Like, just you hear a siren or you see lights, and the heart starts to race. Anyway, we finish the meeting. I have a little private meeting with the core staff, and we make a plan, and how we're going to deal with it, and what do we need to do, and is everything covered, and anything we need to consider. And then everybody leaves, and I say, okay, what am I going to do? And I'm thinking, and the text said that they were in the parking lot looking for me. And I'm thinking, I just don't want to deal with this, and I need to talk to the immigration officer. I want to, the immigration officer, our visa agent, who has taken care of everything and says that everything's correct. And I don't know the system, but I trust him, and we pay him a lot of money to do that. And so I want to connect with him, and I'm thinking, but I can't even go anywhere because they're in the parking lot. I can't leave here. I had my push bicycle there, and my dog tied up to it. And I'm thinking, well, first thing I got to do is take care of my state, because right now I'm feeling afraid. And I'm not going to do anything great in life or in this situation if I'm afraid. So I say to everybody, okay, everybody leaves, and I go outside, and there's this little bench there, and I just sit down and say, okay, what do I need to do? Okay, be attentive to my state, change my state. And so I just close my eyes for a second, take a few breaths, and I say, what am I afraid of? And then I look at it realistically, and I'm like, well, I don't need to be afraid of any of that. I can take care of all of that. What's the worst that could happen? It's not that bad. And my fear goes away. And this was like an amazing moment. Right then I realize there are 2 parking lots. Immigration's in the main one, and my bike is in this other one. And actually all I need to do is walk out of here, go to my bike, and ride to my house, which is nearby, or the place where I was staying, and they're probably not even gonna know. And then I can talk to the guy that's like my lawyer and make a plan. And so that's what I do. And I get back there and I talk to him and he's like, yeah, they really want to see you. I couldn't take care of it, but don't worry, I'll be there with you. Everything's fine. So I'm like, all right, well, you know, the rest of the team can take care of the training for today. I organize things with them. I drive down to immigration. I meet my guy there. And then we wait around for a while and because that's part of how it goes in immigration. We wait and we wait and we wait, and I think that's intentional. And finally, we have our interrogation. And I'm thinking, even though I speak the language fairly well, you know what, I'm just really gonna trust my guy to take care of this. He's the best one in Bali. He's a really trustworthy guy. So I let it go. Like, he receives the question, he's in Indonesian, then he tells me in English, and then I respond in English and he translates. It's going like that. And I'm like, everything's fine, I don't have to worry about. And then we're just going on. They're asking a bunch of questions like that don't make any sense. I don't have anything to do with anything as far as I can tell. And I'm getting a little bit impatient with it. Like, I feel like we're just wasting time here and there's not a problem. What's going on? And then they say, well, where is your boarding pass? I'm like, what? My boarding pass? And say, yeah, where's your boarding pass? And I'm like, I don't have a boarding pass because in you know, there's no record of you being out of the country. I'm like, and I, you know, as I said, I was just on this trip and I'd just gotten back. I had been on that trip in the US and then in Australia, just those two countries. And as it turns out, neither of those countries was doing the old style stamp because they were doing like electronic visa processing or something. So immigration says, you know, you don't have a stamp in your passport. And I'm like trying to process this, like, one, why are they asking me about my trip? Do they doubt that I was on a trip? And what does that have to do with this working permit? It doesn't have anything to do with it. And so I'm like in this process, and I'm like starting to get irritated because I feel like they're just running me around here. And so I got that energy going on in me, but I'm also thinking fast, like, I want to get out of here. And I'm like, well, because they don't do that in those countries. You guys must know that. Why are you asking me this? Fascinating moment then, right? Because I got into this sort of fighting energy, which is what it really was. I was irritated. Right in that moment, this other guy who wasn't even part of the interview, who was just doing something over here. And this is interesting. He was about my size. He had hair, but it was like this long. He had, you know, cut it really short. And he was standing and I was sitting, so he looked kind of down at me and he's like, I don't know what he said because he said it really fast in Indonesian, but I got the gist of it. I got enough of the words, kind of like, you think you're going to play with us? You're not going to play with us? We're going to, you know, and he started coming at me with this and I was like, at first I was like, and then I realized, like, okay, I know how this goes here. It's not wise to fight with immigration guys, and this is not going to be productive. So I kind of like took a yogic breath and went back and I talked to my guy for a minute. I said, and then I realized, like, you know what? I don't have the boarding pass, but I have the e-ticket, and I can, you know, bring that up on my phone and show it to you, and that'll show you my flight. Would that do it for you? And they're like, oh yeah, that'd be fine. I'm like, great, well, let me do that now. And I walk out of the room and I'm like wanting things to move quickly at this point, let's say that. And so I get my phone and it takes me a while to find it, then I find it and I get it and I bring it to my agent, Sujata, and I say, Sujata, can you you know, can you show this to them? And he takes it and he's like, I was like, oh, hold on, actually, I don't want them to take my phone. So I grabbed my phone back, took my phone, made a photocopy of my phone with the e-ticket on it and gave it to them. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's cool. I'm smart. You know, I figured that out. I got ahead of it. And then we wait, and then we wait, and then we wait. And then finally at like, now I think it's like 5 p.m. I've been there all day. And so I go back to my agent. I'm like, what are we waiting for now? And he's like, yeah, actually I was just coming to talk to you. They want to hold you overnight. I'm like, what? I haven't done anything wrong. I've been here all day. I'm cooperating. They want to hold me overnight? He's like, yeah, there's maybe there's something about the type of visa I got, and it should have had this other check mark on it, or it was a different number. And I'm like, I'm not staying here overnight. You know what? I got a training that I'm running, and I've got a daughter that's depending on me, and I'm not going to be in this jail. Meanwhile, y'all, I had heard stories about other yoga teachers getting locked up in that jail, their phone taken from them, no due process and no call allowed. The year before, I'd had 2 of my own employees deported, and I had to call them and tell them on that and say, you have to leave the country in 2 hours, and if you don't, they're going to put you in a holding jail until you do. You know, and I was responsible for them, and up till then I always thought that I could, no matter what, if it came down to it, I could work out something with immigration that would take care of things. And they were unjustly deported, and I couldn't do anything about it. So when they're threatening to put me in jail, I was not taking that lightly. So what I did is I left. I just said, you know what, I'm going to take a few breaths. And I'm outside, and I called a few people, and I called a lawyer that somebody had recommended to me. And then I was just like, and I realized that as soon as I got out of the vibe of that place, which had a certain level of darkness, and then took a few breaths and changed my physiology, changed my state again, then I got new ideas and new creativity, and I was finding solutions. You know, and I said, you know what? I'm just gonna go home. Actually, you know what? I'm not gonna put me in jail. Nobody's here right now. Nobody's told me that they're gonna put me in jail or that they have a right to. So I get in my car and I start driving home. And on that conversation, I ended up talking to the lawyer more, and he said, well, look, they can't put you in jail unless you sign something. And I was like, oh. At the end of the interrogation, I signed something, and I didn't even know what it said. I was just trusting my agent. And I was like, oh man, I did sign something. And so then I'm frustrated. Then I talked to the consulate officer in Jakarta, and he said, well, look, unless you're actually in jail, I can't help you. I'm like, but if I'm in jail, I can't contact you. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. I'm just about home, and I get a phone call from my friend David, who's a friend from Calgary, who I knew from California, who I see in Bali occasionally. And meanwhile, I have like 12 messages backed up that I haven't got back to, but for some reason, David's call comes through, and I start talking to him and hear a little bit about his life, and which was, you know, nice distraction for a moment, good to connect with him. And then he's like, so what's going on with you? And I'm like, you want to come, no, I just told him briefly. And then, that's right, actually what happened is I was starting to tell him about it, and then a call came from the visa agent, and so I was like, David, let me call you back. And I answered the visa agent. He's like, Daniel, where are you? And I'm like, you know, and I hadn't even told him that I was leaving. The poor guy was still there. And I'm like, what's up, Sujata? And he's like, well, they, you know, they want to see you, and and we have to resolve this. And this is, you know, I could feel the tension in his voice. And then he says, you know, and so they're holding me here now. So I realized, like, they're holding this guy there, and they're not going to let him go without me being there. So I'm like, oh, okay, Sujata, I'll be there soon. Meanwhile, I'm all the way back in Ubud, which is like an hour away. I'm like, I'll be there as soon as I can. I got to take care of some things with my daughter, which was true. She was about to get out of class, and I didn't know what I was going to do with her, because by this point I realized I needed to go back to immigration. And I didn't want to worry her. I wanted to make sure she's taken care of. So I'm like, I'll be there as soon as I can. Sujata's going to take care of a couple things. Hang up the phone, call David back, and I say, David, you know, I really like to hang out with you. You want to meet up tonight? He's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, this is a bit weird, but you want to take a ride with me down to immigration? I got to sort something out, but it'll give us, you know, it's a little weird, but it'll give us some time in the car. He's like, sure. And so take care of things, get back in the car, and David's like, so what are we walking into here? And I kind of tell him the story, and get back to immigration, and we wait. And the whole place is closed. They're shut for business. There are like 7 immigration officers working. The big boss is the one that's upset with me, but I haven't seen him. And we're just sitting on a bench. Sujata, me, and David. For like an hour and a half goes by, nothing. And then, and the big boss walks by a couple times and doesn't look at me at all. And David at one point, he's like, it's weird. It's like he doesn't even see you. And I was feeling that too. And at a certain point, David, mind you, who's a beloved, great guy, has long hair, and he's senior to me. He's an elder for me, so he's older than, which makes him ancient, right? Because I remember when there was a corded telephone. So he's got a ponytail, and he was something funky about his clothes. I forget what it was. And he says to me, he's like, you know, Daniel, I think that beard isn't helping things for you. And I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, because, you know, this isn't mostly a Muslim country, and there are certain ways of doing things here, and, you know, looking like, I'm like, who are you to talk? But I'm also like, you know, part of me is afraid of this whole thing going on. And then I also have had some experiences where, and I think at the time I was wearing them like a ponytails, chinny tails, you know, where people judged me for how I looked, and I was once a hippie, and that got certain. So anyway, so I'm kind of thinking maybe it's better if I blend in more, and but you know, I don't want to change who I am in order to fit in. And so you might be listening to this thinking, oh, yeah, there's a lesson for me in who I am, and do I change myself in order to fit in? But this is just my story anyway, so forget about that. Eventually, they served me a paper that says you're going to stay here in jail tonight. We have a goose friend nearby. So I take that as an honor, you coming to hear my story, thank you. And so this time I'm a little more careful about what I'm gonna sign, which was really annoying to these poor guys. So I start reading little bit by little bit, and of course it's in Indonesian, so half an hour's passed and I've got like this far down the thing, and the guy, you know, one of the guys that's working there, poor guy, is probably having to work late. He's doing nothing, just looking busy so that they can harass me. So he's like wanting to move things along, so he gets the book, photocopies the English version of it, and brings it to me. And then I'm like going back and forth. And, you know, and I find the thing that they said I did wrong was so vague as to be meaningless. You know, and so I said, well, hold on, this doesn't make sense to me. And I forget what happened next. And then I called the consulate officer again. And I was like, you know, this law that they're having, and so now I'm reaching the duty officer, so which means I'm talking to the same guy, but now he's at home, and he probably woke him up at this point. And he's like, well, why do they want to hold you in jail? I'm like, I don't know. We're on a little island. They have my passport. It's not like I can go anywhere. I'm fully cooperating. It doesn't really make sense. So he's like, well, you know, how about if I talk to the guy? I'm like, yeah, that would be great. Please, would you talk to him? And by the way, if you're feeling a little bit antsy, we're coming to an intermission in a moment. So hang in there. Pee break is coming. Pee break is coming! And so, but again, I don't want to give my phone to the big scary boss. You know, I don't know what would be implanted in my phone or what they could extract from my phone that would seem incriminating. I don't know. So I say to the duty officer, all right, I'll get his phone number and then you can call him. He's like, okay, well, call me back when you do that. So I hang up, and then I turned to Sujata and I was like, look, the consulate officer wants to talk to the big boss. Would you get his phone number? This is a priceless moment. Sujata looks at me and he's like, would you do it? I was like, come on! I get that he's scary, but okay, fine. So, but then I'm like in the fear of it, and this is a great moment too. The big boss, by this point, it's like 10:30 at night or something, is sitting on this little sofa over here watching a TV up here. I wish I knew which show it was, but and he's just sitting there all alone in that space, and everybody else is pretending to be doing work. And so I walk over to him, and he's sitting on this sofa, you know, over there, and he's sitting down low on the sofa sideways. It's like what I used to call a love seat when I was a kid. And he's sitting on this two-seater love seat watching the TV, and so then he turns and he looks over at me. He looks up at me because he's sitting down. He looks up at me and he's like, "Yes." My heart's a little bit racing. I'm like, then I'm looking down at him and I'm saying, the consulate officer would like to speak to you. And I'm saying this in Indonesian. Slowly as this, I was a bit afraid of him. And so, could I have your phone number? And he looks at me and he goes, "Why does he want to talk to me?" And then I'm like realizing, like, I feel awkward in part because I'm standing up looking down at him. He's on the sofa. So my inclination is to remedy that. So then I go down onto one knee by the sofa arm, which is a little bit awkward because it almost looks like I'm proposing to him. It almost looks like I'm getting on the floor in front of him. And this was my favorite moment of the entire episode, perhaps. And perhaps the most important thing I'm going to share with you on the whole thing is in that moment, and I start to speak